We've been taught, most of our lives, to evaluate our progress by how far we've come, by what we've accumulated, by how many steps we've taken, how many goals we've hit, how much we've achieved compared to others. From the time we're children, we're asked, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" As if value is somewhere in the distant future. As if we're incomplete right now. That mindset quietly conditions us to believe that the measure of our worth lies somewhere out there. It's subtle, but powerful. It causes us to constantly chase a destination that keeps moving, and no matter how far we travel, it never feels like enough. Because the value was never in the distance. It was never in how far you went. It's in how much you grew while moving. You can move 5,000 miles across the world, take every course, earn every certificate, and still be the same person with the same limiting thoughts, the same insecurities, the same emotional patterns. Progress isn't about checking boxes. It's not about external movement. It's about internal transformation. It's who you become in the process. It's who you had to confront, forgive, release, and rise above. It's not the plane ticket, the new job, the relationship, or the career pivot. It's the decision you made to say, "I will not be the same person I was yesterday." That's where the power is. That's where the value lies. And that's what most people miss. They celebrate the finish line, but they never ask themselves, "Who am I now that I wasn't before?" Because you can win the race and still be running from yourself. You can climb the mountain and still be haunted by the same doubt that lived in you at the base. If you haven't shifted inside, if your self-image hasn't elevated, if your identity hasn't evolved, then the distance means nothing. It's just movement. What matters is elevation. And elevation doesn't happen outside in. It happens inside out. The truth is, every single person is creating from their self-concept, not from their goals, not from their wishes, but from how they see themselves. And unless you change that image, unless you rewire who you believe yourself to be, nothing you achieve will ever feel fulfilling. Why? Because you'll always subconsciously reject or sabotage the things you don't believe you're worthy of. You'll push them away or shrink under their weight. The outer reality will show up, but you won't feel connected to it. It won't feel like it belongs to you. And that's because the person you became internally didn't match the results you produced externally. That's why the distance doesn't define the value. It doesn't tell the truth about who you are. There are people who have done less on the outside, but have made quantum leaps in their self-concept. They've learned how to love themselves, they've stopped betraying their own voice, they've healed, overcome guilt, they've healed. And there are others who have done so much on the outside, but still feel empty, still feel like imposters, still chasing something to make them feel whole. The difference isn't in how far they went. The difference is in who they allowed themselves to become. Growth is not a straight line. It's energetic, it's vibrational, it's invisible at first. It doesn't look like a title or a certificate. It looks like being able to sit in stillness without needing to escape your own mind. It looks like setting boundaries you used to avoid. It looks like walking away from a life that looked good on paper but felt dead in your spirit. It's not glamorous, and sometimes it's painful, but the reward is internal freedom, and that's priceless. There is something powerful that happens when you realize you're not chasing a result, you're chasing a version of you that already exists, the you that is confident, the you that is at peace, the you that walks with certainty and presence. That version isn't far away. It's not behind some mountain of achievement. It's unlocked the moment you decide to stop measuring your life by distance and start measuring it by depth. How deeply have you connected with who you are? How much have you let go of who you're not? How honest can you be with yourself in silence? These are the real markers of growth. Most people don't realize this until they've arrived somewhere and still feel unfulfilled. That's when the question finally comes, why doesn't this feel the way I thought it would? And the answer is simple. You brought the same mindset with you. You brought the same beliefs. You traveled all that way, but carried the same luggage of fear, self-doubt, and emotional residue. Until you let go of that, no destination will ever be enough. It will always feel temporary, because your external world will always mirror your internal vibration. What you feel, you attract. What you believe, you live. So if you want a new life, a new reality, a new level, don't just move farther, move deeper. Go inward, transform at the level of identity, not just behavior, because that's where everything starts. That's where the real value lives. We live in a world that is quick to label emotions, good or bad, positive or negative, acceptable or unacceptable. From a very young age, we're taught to chase the so-called positive ones, happiness, excitement, confidence, and to avoid, suppress, or deny the negative ones, sadness, anger, fear, guilt, shame. The problem with this conditioning is that it teaches us to fear our own internal world. It makes us believe that when we feel low, there's something wrong with us, or something that needs to be fixed. But the truth is far more empowering. Feelings are not facts. They are not final. They are not fatal. They are feedback, internal signals, indicators, not identities. And when you understand that, everything begins to change. You see, a feeling is simply energy moving through the body. That's all. It doesn't define you. It doesn't have the power to control you unless you give it that power. But most people are running from their feelings because they've never been taught how to read them. They treat negative emotions like enemies, but they're really just messages. They are trying to tell you something important, that you've stepped out of alignment with your highest truth, that you've stepped out of line with your ancestors' calling ethics, that you've stepped out of alignment with your highest truth. Take an inventory that your current thoughts, actions, or beliefs are not in harmony with your authentic self, that something within you needs your attention, not your avoidance. Imagine if we treated emotional pain like physical pain. If you cut your hand, you wouldn't yell at your body for bleeding. You wouldn't judge yourself for needing a bandage. You'd recognize it as a signal, take care of the wound, and allow it to heal. But when the pain is emotional, we either suppress it or dramatize it. We either push it down and pretend it doesn't exist, or we let it take over our identity. Both are imbalances. What we need is neutrality, awareness without judgment, the ability to feel the emotion, acknowledge it, and understand what it's pointing toward. Because every negative emotion carries data. Anger, for example, often points to a boundary being crossed. Guilt may point to a misalignment with your values. Or, sometimes, it's inherited programming, someone else's voice echoing in your head. Fear might not be warning you of danger, it might just be alerting you to the edge of your comfort zone. But you won't know any of this if you don't stop and listen, if you don't pause long enough to ask, what is this feeling here to teach me? Most people don't do that. They either numb the feeling through distraction, scrolling, substances, overworking, or they identify with it. They say things like, I am anxious, or I am depressed, as if those emotions are who they are, rather than what they are experiencing. But you are not your emotions. You are the consciousness that observes them. You are the awareness behind them. And that awareness is where your power lies. The shift happens when you stop reacting to your feelings and start responding to them. When you stop trying to get rid of negative emotions and instead learn to alchemize them, to use them as raw material for growth. Because once you see them for what they are, temporary signals, you're no longer afraid of them, and when you're no longer afraid, you stop running, you stop resisting, and in that space of non-resistance, the emotion loses its grip. It passes through you instead of staying stuck inside of you. This is why suppressing emotions is never the solution. What you resist persists. What you ignore amplifies. Emotional energy doesn't just disappear. If you don't process it consciously, it settles into your body, into your nervous system, into your subconscious, and starts influencing your behavior in ways you can't even trace. That's why people find themselves stuck in patterns, procrastination, self-sabotage, unhealthy relationships, and they can't figure out why. It's not a problem of logic. It's unprocessed emotional energy dictating their choices from the shadows. And the only way out is through. So you have to feel it, not to wallow in it, but to release it, to understand its message, to reclaim your authority. There is no strength in denial. True strength is found in the ability to face what's uncomfortable without shrinking. It's in being able to say, yes, I feel fear. Yes, I feel pain, but I am not these things. I am the observer, and I choose how to respond. And that choice is everything. Because the moment you recognize that you are not a victim of your feelings, you become a creator again. You remember your power to choose a new focus, a new perspective, a new meaning. And when you change the meaning, you change the emotion. That's the root of emotional mastery. Not the absence of negative feelings, but the wisdom to navigate them with clarity and grace. Most people go through life in a state of reaction. They wake up and immediately respond to the world around them, the notifications on their phone, the demands of their job, the expectations of others. They respond to the weather, the traffic, the headlines, the moods of the people in their home. And they don't even realize they're doing it. They've handed their emotional and mental state over to whatever the world throws at them. If something good happens, they feel good. If something bad happens, they feel bad. They become like a thermostat controlled by everything external, constantly adjusting to the environment, but never consciously choosing the temperature. That's reaction. And reaction keeps you stuck in survival. Reaction keeps you small. Creation is something entirely different. It doesn't wait for the outside world to determine how you feel. Creation starts from the inside. It says, I don't need the world to change in order for me to feel empowered, centered, or peaceful. I can choose those states now. When you shift from reaction to creation, you stop living on autopilot and start living on purpose. You stop responding to the old patterns, the old programming, the old emotional triggers, and you start building something new. You begin to design your life moment by moment from the inside out. But here's the truth that most people never hear. You cannot create from a place of blame. You cannot create from a place of victimhood. As long as you believe that your circumstances are in charge of your emotions, you have no real power. You may get temporary motivation, you may set goals, but deep down, you're still being run by something outside of you. Creation requires radical responsibility. It demands that you look at your life and say, this may not all be my fault, but I am responsible for what I do with it. And that's a powerful place to stand. Because when you take responsibility for your inner world, your outer world begins to shift with it. Every negative feeling, every emotional reaction is a signal that you're creating unconsciously, that you're still living in reaction to the past, to a belief system you didn't even choose, to a version of yourself that was shaped by survival rather than vision. But once you become aware of it, you can change it. You can interrupt the pattern and install something new. You can respond, instead of react. You can pause, breathe, and ask, what would the highest version of me choose in this moment? That's not something you do once. That's a practice. That's discipline. That's mastery. And it starts with understanding that your thoughts are not random. They're not just reactions to the world. They're instructions to your subconscious. Every thought is a blueprint. Every feeling is a frequency. And what you repeatedly think and feel, you attract more of. So if you're always reacting to your current reality, you're just recreating more of the same. But if you can generate new emotions, gratitude, peace, joy, before the external circumstances give you a reason, now you're creating. Now you're stepping into the field of possibility. Now you're signaling to the universe that you're ready for something greater. Creation isn't about forcing outcomes. It's not about trying to control every detail of your life. It's about alignment. It's about becoming so aligned with the version of you that already lives in that next level reality that you begin to match their frequency now. You think their thoughts, you feel their feelings, you act from their energy. You stop waiting for something to change and you become the change. And when you become it, life begins to reflect it back to you. This is where most people get stuck. They try to think positive while still feeling negative. They try to visualize success while still identifying with struggle. And that creates internal conflict. It creates resistance. Because you can't create a new reality from the same emotional state that built the old one. You have to feel it first. You have to embody it now. Not when the money comes, not when the relationship shows up, not when the problem goes away. Now. Because creation doesn't wait. Creation is now. And if you can feel the frequency of what you desire before it shows up, you collapse the timeline. You bring the future into the present. You become a magnet for the very thing you used to chase. But again, this requires responsibility. It means you can no longer blame your mood on your environment. It means you can no longer make excuses about why you feel stuck. It means you stop waiting and start deciding. You stop reacting to what is and start creating from what could be. You realize that your imagination is more powerful than your memory, and you start using it intentionally, not just to escape your current reality, but to design a new one. And in doing so, you start to realize something even more powerful, that everything you've been waiting for is not out there, it's within you. It's always been within you. You just had to stop reacting long enough to remember that you are the one creating it all. Every thought, every emotion, every belief, it's all shaping your world. And when you take full ownership of life, not just mentally but emotionally, you move from being a reactor of life to a creator of it. Memory is a beautiful thing, but for most people, it becomes a trap. We don't realize how often we're living in a loop, reliving the past, replaying old stories, dragging yesterday's pain into today's possibilities. The mind, unless trained otherwise, defaults to what it knows. And what it knows is based on memory. What you've seen, heard, experienced, and interpreted. But here's the problem. Memory is limited. It's tied to who you were, not who you're becoming. It reflects your past programming, your conditioning, your survival responses, and if you keep drawing from it, you will keep creating from it. The future ends up being nothing more than a slightly modified version of the past, repackaged with different faces and circumstances, but the same emotional patterns. Imagination, on the other hand, is limitless. It doesn't rely on what has already happened. It reaches into what could happen. It speaks the language of potential, of expansion, of truth beyond evidence. It is the faculty of the mind that allows us to step outside the boundaries of past experience and access realities we've never touched before. And that's where transformation begins. That's where emotional freedom lives. Because if you keep looking back for answers, you will only find more of what hurt you, more of what limited you, more of what kept you small. The path to freedom doesn't move backward, it moves forward. Through vision, through intention, through imagination. Most people try to feel better by analyzing their pain. They go deeper into the memory, thinking if they can just understand it, they'll be free from it. But emotion doesn't always respond to logic. You can't always think your way out of a feeling. Sometimes, what you need is not a better explanation, but a better vision. A vision that is strong enough to pull you out of the emotional gravity of the past and lift you into a new vibration, because your nervous system doesn't know the difference between a vividly imagined future and a lived experience. What you see in your mind, you begin to feel, and what you feel repeatedly becomes your dominant state of being. This is where most people misunderstand the power they have. They think imagination is for children or artists. They think it's fantasy, detached from reality. But in truth, it's the foundation of all reality. Every invention, every movement, every breakthrough that's ever reshaped the world started first in someone's imagination. It started in the unseen. And the same is true for emotional healing. If you want to move beyond your negative feelings, fear, guilt, shame, regret, you have to start feeding your mind something new, something that doesn't come from memory, something that comes from possibility. Think of it like this. If your emotional state is a garden, then your memories are the old soil, already tilled, already used, already full of weeds if left unchecked. Imagination is new soil, rich with the nutrients of hope and potential. When you imagine a new future, when you visualize yourself thriving, loving, leading, healing, you plant seeds that bypass logic and speak directly to the subconscious. And your subconscious doesn't argue. It doesn't know the difference between reality and imagination. It just responds to repetition and emotion. So if you practice seeing a better version of your life and feeling the emotions tied to it, peace, freedom, joy, empowerment, then you begin to shift your internal chemistry. Your brain rewires, your body starts to believe, your energy changes. And yet, most people stay stuck because they won't allow themselves to imagine. They say things like, "I can't see anything better," or "That's not realistic." But what they're really saying is, "I trust my pain more than I trust my power." They've built their identity around what has been instead of what could be. They wear their trauma like armor and call it personality. But none of that is who they truly are. That's who they became in response to a past they haven't yet released. And the only way to release it fully is to build a stronger connection to the future. Not just any future, but the one that feels expansive, authentic, and alive. You don't have to know every step. You don't have to have it all figured out. All you need is the willingness to see yourself beyond what you've known, to stop rehearsing the story of why you can't, and start imagining the version of you that already did. The version of you that has already healed, already risen, already claimed the life that once felt impossible. That image is not a fantasy. It's a blueprint. It's your emotional GPS. And when you tune into it consistently, when you let it become more familiar than the pain you're used to create, you begin to shift your frequency. You begin to attract people, opportunities, insights that match the new story you're telling yourself. And slowly, your external world starts to reflect the internal one you've chosen to create. Most people are not suffering because their goals are too big. They're suffering because their vision is too small. because they keep looking at life through the lens of what they've survived instead of what they're here to build. But nothing changes until you change what you're projecting. If you keep replaying the past, you keep reliving it. But if you project a future filled with clarity, purpose, and strength, and if you feel that vision in your body as if it were already real, you begin to detach from the old emotional anchors. You begin to create momentum in a new direction. And that momentum is what breaks the cycle, not because something outside of you changed, but because you changed the image inside. And that image is what starts everything.
Most people are living in a constant state of inner conflict, pulled between who they know they could be and who they keep showing up as. They wake up each morning with a whisper in their soul, reminding them that they were made for more. Yet they spend the rest of the day trying to survive in a version of life that doesn't reflect that knowing. And this is where the real exhaustion comes from. Not just from work or responsibilities or circumstances, but from the emotional weight of pretending to be okay when you're not, pretending to fit into spaces that don't feel like home. Pretending you're satisfied when deep down you're not even close to touching your true capacity. That inner war becomes normal. But just because something is familiar doesn't mean it's natural. We weren't designed to live in fragmentation. We weren't meant to disconnect from our truth just to be accepted or to keep things comfortable. But that's what so many people do. They sacrifice alignment for attachment. They bury their authenticity beneath layers of guilt, fear, and social conditioning. And they wonder why they feel numb, why they feel lost, why they can't seem to access the energy, the creativity, the power they know they have somewhere inside. It's not because they're broken. It's because they're out of alignment. Because when you are not in alignment with who you really are, your thoughts, your words, your actions, your environment all begin to feel heavy. They require force instead of flow, survival instead of creation. True healing, true power comes when you begin to return to yourself. Not the self that was shaped by wounds and expectations, but the self that existed before the world told you who to be. That self still lives in you. It's not gone, it's just been buried, and the more you ignore it, the louder the negative feelings become. Not because they want to punish you, but because they're trying to wake you up. Emotional pain is often the soul's alarm clock. It rings to let you know something needs to change. Not outside, but inside. Because alignment isn't about perfection. It's about coherence. It's about integrity. When your values match your actions, when your inner voice matches your outer behavior, there's a sense of peace that no amount of external success can ever replace. But most people have been taught to chase results, not resonance. They've been taught to follow formulas, not intuition. So they end up building lives that look good on the surface but feel hollow underneath. And then they think, what's wrong with me? When they still feel anxious, unfulfilled, disconnected. But the truth is, there's nothing wrong with them. They've just built a reality out of alignment with their essence. You cannot force yourself to feel whole in a life that demands you leave parts of yourself behind. This is why alignment is not just a spiritual concept. It's an emotional necessity. An emotional necessity. When you begin to realign with your truth, things start to shift. Maybe not instantly on the outside, but internally, you'll feel it. The resistance starts to melt. The pressure starts to ease. You stop carrying the weight of false roles. You stop trying to impress people who don't even know who you really are. You stop making decisions from fear and start making them from clarity. And from that space, healing happens not because you're fixing yourself, but because you're finally listening to yourself. Alignment doesn't mean everything is easy or that you won't face challenges, but it means you'll face them as yourself, whole, grounded, awake, and that makes all the difference. Because when you're aligned, even your pain has purpose, even your struggle has meaning. You stop seeing problems as punishments and start seeing them as initiations, opportunities to go deeper, to rise higher, to shed what no longer fits. That's the path. Not a straight line, not a formula, but a return, a remembering, a recalibration of energy, intention and action. To live in alignment is to stop outsourcing your power, to stop waiting for permission to be who you already are. It's choosing yourself again and again, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's uncomfortable. Because real alignment will often disrupt what's familiar. It will cost you certain relationships, identities, habits, but what it gives you is priceless. It gives you back your voice, your energy, your presence, your freedom to move through the world without pretending, without shrinking, without apologizing for what your soul came here to express. That expression is unique to you. No one else can define it, live it, or validate it. And once you accept that, you begin to move differently. You start showing up from a place of wholeness rather than lack. You begin to lead yourself instead of waiting to be led. And that's when you access the kind of emotional stability that doesn't waver with every external fluctuation. Because when you're rooted in alignment, you don't need everything around you to be perfect. You just need to be connected to your truth. And from that place, even the chaos makes sense. Even the unknown feels safe, because you know who you are. And once you know that, deeply and without negotiation, nothing outside of you can control what you feel inside. When people hear the word choice, they often think of it in terms of big life-altering decisions, career moves, relationships, where to live. But the most powerful choices we ever make are not the ones we announce to the world. They're the quiet, unseen internal choices we make every single day. The decision to shift your focus. The decision to interrupt a thought that doesn't serve you. The decision to breathe deeply instead of reacting. The decision to speak kindly to yourself when the old voice of judgment tries to rise up. These are the choices that shape your emotional landscape more than any external decision ever could. Because life doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to what you're being. And what you're being, moment to moment, is the result of the choices you make about where you place your attention, how you interpret your experience, and what you decide to believe. Most people don't realize they even have this kind of choice. They think their emotions are automatic, that their reactions are fixed, that their outlook is a product of circumstance. But that's not the truth. That's programming, conditioning. It's the result of living unconsciously, reacting to life, instead of consciously responding to it. Emotional mastery begins the moment you realize that your state is not set in stone. That no matter how overwhelming the external situation may be, you still have the ability to direct your internal world. You might not control the event, but you always control the meaning you assign to it. And meaning is everything. Let's be clear, this isn't about denying your emotions or pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's about acknowledging the emotion and then asking, what else is available to me right now? Because every moment offers you multiple emotional roads to walk down. You can go down the road of fear or the road of faith. You can stay in resentment or shift into release. You can relive the wound or you can begin to rewrite the narrative. But to do that, you have to stay conscious. You have to stay awake enough to recognize when you're slipping into an old pattern and then make a different choice. It sounds simple, but it's not always easy because your brain is wired for efficiency, not happiness. It wants to keep you safe, not fulfilled. So it repeats what's familiar. It sticks to the known emotional responses because that's what it's done before. That's why the choice to shift your state is not a one-time thing. It's a discipline, a practice. It's the art of catching yourself in the act of being who you no longer want to be and saying, and not this time, and not this time. It's the moment you take your power back, and it happens one breath, one thought, one shift at a time. People often underestimate just how powerful these micro-decisions are. They think change has to be dramatic to be effective. But transformation is built in the subtle moments. The moment you pause instead of reacting, the moment you speak the truth instead of hiding, the moment you sit with a feeling instead of distracting yourself. Each of those moments stacks. They build a new emotional baseline. And eventually, the emotions that used to control you lose their grip, not because you fought them, but because you stopped feeding them with unconscious choices. There's also something liberating about knowing that you don't have to wait for everything to be perfect before you feel better. You don't need all the answers. You don't need anyone to change. You just need to choose your next moment with intention. That could mean choosing to reach for a thought that feels slightly better, or choosing to move your body when you feel stuck, or choosing to breathe deeply when anxiety kicks in. These are not dramatic acts. They're subtle, but they're sacred. Because they interrupt the loop. They remind you that you are not at the mercy of your mind. You are the one directing it. What's also important to understand is that choice is cumulative. Every time you choose courage over comfort, clarity over chaos, responsibility over blame, you're strengthening a new emotional muscle. And like any muscle, the more you use it, the stronger it becomes. You start to trust yourself more. You begin to believe in your ability to self-regulate, to shift, to lead yourself even when life feels heavy. That kind of inner trust changes everything, because now your well-being is no longer dependent on what the world gives you. It's rooted in who you decide to be. The real power of choice lies in its accessibility. You don't have to wait for a better day to begin choosing better thoughts. You don't have to wait for someone to apologize before you choose peace. You don't have to wait for fear to disappear before you choose to move forward. Every moment presents an invitation. Will you choose from your past, or will you choose from your potential? Will you respond from your pain, or will you respond from your possibility? These aren't just theoretical questions. They're the quiet battles being fought in your mind every single day. And each time you choose intentionally, you're casting a vote for the person you're becoming. You're reinforcing a new identity. You're stepping further away from the cycle of emotional reactivity and closer to emotional authority. And in that place, real change is not only possible, it becomes inevitable.